Welcome to Neurodivergent Faith, a podcast to help you navigate the beautiful and complicated intersection of neurodivergence and Christian faith and practice. My name's Josh Davis. I'm autistic, ADHD, a spiritual director, and an ordained pastor. And I'm delighted to have you join me as we explore the unique ways neurodivergent people experience God, worship, community, and scripture, along with special interests, sensory and attention differences, social and communication challenges, and much more. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Neurodivergent Faith. As always, I'm glad that you've joined us. And today I'm looking forward to talking to Kim Botto, who does a lot of work around inclusion of neurodivergent children and children with other disabilities in church spaces and faith spaces. She works a lot with ministry leaders and church leaders, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. So, Kim, welcome to Neurodivergent Faith.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. I'm curious, for listeners who don't know you yet, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey as a mom, a grandma?
Sure. So, a short version, I have always loved kids. And what I found later in life as I started looking back on the through line, I especially enjoy kids that are often on the outside of the circle of the playground, the kids who are, shrieking on the plane. Even when I was in high school, they would give me the kids that nobody else wanted in their group. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't really until much later that I realized that some people were not drawn to those children. So I got a business degree, but then was called to ministry after the birth of our first child. And the last church that I worked at is where I really started to really explore what does trauma informed mean? Because we adopted our two youngest, one at the age of 10 and one at the age of 16. And we already had 3 bio kids. So we thought, we got this nailed. Like, we're awesome parents. And because of their background, they had much different needs than our biological children had, which made me start thinking about the kids coming into our church. And so we really started training our teams on trauma-informed practices, which, they're based on connection and relationship. So this foundation is good, not just for kids who've experienced trauma, but also for kids whose brains are wired differently, who have disabilities, who just navigate the world differently. And so that's what started me on that journey. So I've been a kids and student pastor for decades. Currently, I refer to it as kind of retired. What I do now is I work with a lot of ministry leaders to create spaces for every child to belong, because I believe that the church should be the safest place for kids to bring their hard stories, for kids to be fully themselves. And sadly, in many, many cases, it's not a safe place for kids. So that's why in my kind of retired life, I'm spending a lot of time trying to help train leaders. I mean, first, before we train them, we have to help them understand, these kids, it's not a deficit. It's just, their brains are just wired differently. Mm-hmm. And so if a child is not meeting our expectations in our environment, it's up to us as the adult to make changes to the environment so that the child or teen can better participate. So yeah, that's kind of my thing. Oh, and I have 5 kids and 11 grandkids that all live within 1.5 miles of us, which is amazing, and also led to my retirement.
Yes, semi-retired or kind of retired. I don't know you very well, but I followed you some online and I get your newsletter, and you seem like you're a pretty busy retired person.
Yeah, I do. It's fun. I mean, I believe that God he's continuing to write our story no matter what decade of life we're in. And I think too many people, we have life experiences that other people don't have because they haven't lived as long as we have. So, and I love being around ministry leaders. So it's fun for me. But yeah, I do some things.
Yeah. When you talked about that kind of overlap between neurodivergence and trauma informed. It's so powerful, actually. So many of the things that you would do for a trauma informed approach to worship or a trauma informed approach to children's ministry would also be so life-giving and safe for a neurodivergent brain. And you
Right.
mentioned wanting church to be the safest place for these
Hmm.
kids. And I'm curious how you came to that, because a lot of adults have this notion, well, if our environment doesn't work for this kid, then the kid just needs to adapt to our environment. But I'm hearing something different from you. And I'm wondering, has that always been in you, or did you have like a turning point moment where you realized maybe the environments also need to adapt and shift?
It has not always been in me. As I said, I've always loved kids, but what I sought to do is when I saw a kid who was behaving in a way that wasn't viewed as socially acceptable in whatever environment they're in, what I wanted to do was fix the kid. So then people would no longer be uncomfortable, so people would no longer judge them. But as I continued to be around more and more kids, it's really through the trauma aspect of it that I started to realize, oh, wait a minute. They're not intentionally doing things to upset me, or they're not trying to ruin my day. Like this kid has had really, really hard stuff happen in their life, and they're in survival mode, and they don't trust me. And it has nothing to do with me. The fact that they don't trust me has nothing to do with me. It's
Mm.
about the people, the adults that have been in their life previously. So that's when so it started with the kids who'd experienced trauma that I'm like, and there's science that shows, oh, their brains are wired for survival. So then as I continued to work with kids who are neurodivergent, I mean, I remember I had an autistic child who just like our children's ministry environment was too much for him. And these environments we think are super fun and amazing. For some, it is just too much,
Oh,
louder,
interesting.
bigger, brighter. A lot
Yeah.
of bigger, brighter is not always better. Like with this kid, I found that just getting him to a quieter space, he could participate and he could do the things. And so it just made me curious as far as, I wonder what other kids are. They just need us to make minor adaptations. Because I think we think, oh, well, for one, for disability ministry, I think a lot of times, I talk to people and let's say the barrier is money, because when they think of disability ministry, they think of wider bathroom stalls and ramps.
Sure.
But really, most of the changes that we need to make cost nothing. And many of the changes is just helping the adults and leaders fully look at this person as created in God's image, intentionally created, and there's nothing wrong with them. They're just different. And I think not just the church, but the world, we got this little teeny tiny view of what typical is.
Yeah.
And so we keep creating for typical, and actually a typical kid, like it's fewer and fewer kids are what we would describe as typical.
Yeah, and I've thought about that a lot. I think often what happens when we're creating these environments for, like you said, this tiny little square definition of what is typical, then even some of the people who are quote unquote more typical than others, they still have parts of themselves that don't fit in that environment, and they're
Right.
marginalizing parts of their own minds and hearts and bodies that don't fit in that tiny little square. And that leads to this
Mhm.
fragmentation that I think is exactly opposite of the gospel of Jesus, that seeks to reconcile all things together and integrate and move towards wholeness rather than fragmenting. Yeah, that's so important. And I like what you said about how rather than focusing on fixing this kid, maybe it's our mindset that needs to shift.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what happens when we see this child as created in the image of God on purpose. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how have you seen that make a difference in either individuals' lives or in ministries that you've come alongside?
Gosh, I mean, I look at, like, if I think of me and if I encounter someone who is behaving in a way other than what I think they should be behaving, if my mindset is, hey, this is an amazing person. This is a person who has a story that started long before I had my encounter with them. So maybe them being upset right now has nothing to do with me, but it's because maybe there was somebody else in the position that I'm in that has hurt them in the past or that has done something that caused them not to trust them. Um, I think just when we assume the best in people, oh my gosh, Josh, that changes everything, right?
Yeah. And I also hear you saying, in order to do that, we have to learn how to not take it personally. I think that's
Yeah.
really hard for some people. They assume that the behavior is some indicator of their worth, this behavior that's coming towards them from this other person. They assume that it's a commentary on their value or their worth as an individual, but it's not about them at all. You say in your book, you wrote a book called Boundless Hope for Every Child, and you talk about behavior as communication. Can you maybe
Mhm.
unpack that just a little bit?
Dr. Karen Purvis, she's a pioneer in working with kids who experience trauma. And she says behavior is the language of children who've lost their voice.
Mm,
So kids are communicating with us with the only thing they have available to them, which might not be their words, it might be their behavior. And this isn't true just of kids who experience trauma. I have a grandson who is 8 and he is autistic. And his sister, somebody was, I forget what somebody was saying something about him. And she said, oh, he has a really smart brain. He just doesn't use words out of his mouth to talk.
mm,
Like that whole thing right there. Like she led with who he is, his strengths, he has a smart brain. And then she didn't say that he didn't talk. I mean, what she said is he doesn't use words out of his mouth to talk. So
right.
actually, what she's telling us is he does talk. And this is from a 5-year-old. She's 5. So she's saying he talks, he just doesn't use words out of his mouth. And I think too often when a kid, I mean, I work mostly with kids and students, so, but it's applicable to adults too. But when they're behaving in a way that maybe makes us feel uncomfortable or doesn't fit in with our plan, we go straight to how can we stop the behavior? Whereas if we just take a moment, take a deep breath, maybe get a glass of water, Diet Coke, whatever
Mm,
helps you calm, and then really think about, oh, I wonder what's going on with this kid. Dr. Ross Green says children do well when they can.
mhm.
So that means if they're not doing what we describe as well, then they probably need our help. So just thinking, oh, is the environment too loud? Are we asking them to do something that maybe they don't have the ability to do right now? Maybe I think especially, a lot of the kids that I work with who are diagnosed with ADHD, we give them 5 steps. They may be super smart,
Yep.
but they simply cannot follow 5-step instructions. We
Right.
need so we look at them and we're going, what's wrong with you? I'm like, how clear could I make it? Well, actually, adult, you could make it clearer by giving them 2 steps at a time and then give them a high five when they complete that and then give them 2 more steps. So, but that child might not be able to tell us, well, they probably can't tell us, Josh, you just gave me 5 steps and I can only do it 2 at a time. Instead, what they're going to do is they're going to appear to not comply. They may even get aggravated because they know they're not doing what they're supposed to do, but they can't figure out what it is. So that's their behavior communicating to us.
We focused a lot this season on parenting, both
Hmm.
parenting neurodivergent kids and then also parenting as neurodivergent parents ourselves and how
Mm-hmm.
interesting and challenging that is. But one of the things we've said is we have to suspend some of our assumptions. Maybe some of us have been taught to equate screaming and kicking with rebellion, right? So as soon as we see screaming and kicking in our minds, it equals rebellion. And we're assuming
Yep.
that's what the child is communicating, right? But you're
Right.
saying we got to get curious. We gotta think outside the box and begin to wonder, what are they actually needing? What's the need underneath this behavior? If I assume that they would do well when they can, or if they can, then
Mm-hmm.
what's prohibiting them in this moment from being able to do well?
Well, I think reframing it instead of looking at the kid as being defiant and that they won't do something, reframe it to, oh, wait, if it's true that children do well when they can, then that means actually they can't do it right now. And then dig beneath. I mean, there's questions you can ask. Um, you know, identify the behavior. If it's a recurring behavior, when's it happening? Oh, it's always happening immediately after school. Like I had somebody who was telling me, I don't know what's wrong with my kid. Like they do great at school, then they come home and I try to do homework with them, and they're like ripping up paper and so we talked about some different strategies, and she was able to discover, oh, and this is super common. I mean, you hear people talk about it all the time. Kids hold it together all day long at school, and then they get home to their safe place and they everything they've been holding in comes out. So what we talked about, instead of going straight to homework, have a snack, play outside. What are the things this kid loved to swing? Go outside, let the kids swing for 30 minutes. And she did that, and oh my gosh, all of a sudden homework isn't a struggle.
Yeah, and finding those specific things that help regulate each child individually. Like I was that kid too. As a kid, my parents even told me like when I was inconsolable as a kid, if they put me in a swing and wound it up and it would go for 5 or 10 minutes or something, but that gentle
Hmm.
rocking, consistent motion
Right,
was the only thing. Physical touch, nope. Eye contact,
right.
nope. But put me in that swing. And so figuring out for each kid what's regulating for them and then recognize,
Yep.
oh, here's the pattern of when they consistently get deregulated. For us in our family now, it's like meal times. We have the worst interactions with one another
Oh,
around mealtime.
oh.
I grew up being taught like a good family sits down and eats a meal at the table every day together, right? But we've started to realize with the sounds and the smells and the pressure and the demand for looking at one another in the face and having conversation, all of those things don't set our unique family up for success. And so beginning to recognize that pattern. Oh, we always get into these kinds of things at mealtime. Maybe
Hmm.
shift something. Maybe we need to try something different.
Yeah, because who said that you have to have a family dinner with everybody sitting at the table? I have a friend whose kid's autistic, and she said one of the biggest like ahas for her is, wait a minute, my kid can eat his dinner standing up at the table. Who says he can't? And I think a lot of times for parents, what happens is we feel judged by other people. And so then we try to get our kid to comply to this unwritten rule of what's acceptable and what's not. And if we would just, like you said, look at the individual kid and do what's best for that kid. And I will say, too, if you do have a child who maybe they're having some big outbursts, and try something, and if it doesn't work, that's still a win because you've eliminated a possible solution. It's like,
Mm.
oh, okay, this doesn't work. And for kids, I've seen with this is what I used to think, a kid with ADHD who's just moving all the time. Well, I just need to get him to move more. I need to have him run, laps around the block, go out on the trampoline. But for some kids, that's actually when they're moving a bunch, that's actually that might be an indication that they need to slow down. So maybe they need a quiet little corner in the house with a beanbag and some noise canceling headphones and maybe some silly putty or, different manipulatives that they can play with. So yeah, Josh, you're absolutely right. You got to figure out what works with the kid, which can feel overwhelming because parents just want to know what's the one thing I need to do. Well, let's talk about, there's 5 different things you can try and experiment and see what works best.
Yeah, and I like that reframe of, so you try one thing and it doesn't work, that's still a win because
Yeah,
you've
it is.
gotten more information, right?
Right.
I think another thing that happens, you talked about parents feeling judged. I definitely experienced some of that, but I also experienced this, well, I had to X, Y, Z, and I turned out okay, right? And then that puts pressure on my kids and asks them to actually suffer in some of the same ways that I suffer, which is that really what we want if we're honest and if we're
No,
zooming out?
no, no, we don't want that. And I think some people will say, oh, that's just being soft and that's being, no, it's figuring out the best environment for your kid to thrive and grow. You still have boundaries. You still have consequences. And we want our kids to be the best version of who God created them to be. And that might require us to make some changes to drop some of our assumptions and have family dinners with half the people standing at the table instead of sitting in the chair. And
Mhm.
in kids ministry, I always say, like sitting still is not a spiritual discipline. We get confused on what the non-negotiables are. And to me, sitting still is not a non-negotiable. You can hear about Jesus while you are moving. And for some kids, they can actually take in the information better and apply it better if their body is moving.
Yeah, I saw a slide recently at church for kids, and I can't remember. There were 3 words, I can only remember 2, but one was freeze, and it was indicating, hey, your body needs to be completely still in order to engage with God. And the second one was
Oh,
fold. You got to fold your hands
oh.
for prayer. Like, what would you offer if you walked into a church like that and you saw that kind of messaging? What would you offer?
Well, the first thing I would have to do is take a deep breath and watch what my face is communicating as I read that slide. And then I would want to know, what is this based on? Like, is like chapter verse? Where's this telling? Because I think that's something too. And there is no biblical precedent for that we have to close our eyes and fold our hands. And I think we do kids a disservice by telling them these things because then they start to think there's a very narrow way for them to worship God or talk to God. I mean, I do a lot of praying when I'm driving and my eyes are wide open and my hands are not folded.
Yes. I'm glad for that, actually. And so are all the
Yeah.
drivers
So are
around.
the other drivers. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Well, let's shift to focus just a little bit more on church for a bit. What do you wish pastors and ministry leaders understood about the experience of families who quietly stop attending church because their children don't feel safe or welcome?
Well, first, I think there's a gap in awareness of senior leaders and the reality of what families are experiencing. And the reason I think there's a gap is based on research. And Lifeway surveyed senior leaders where they asked them, would someone with a disability feel welcomed and included in your church? I think that, I know it was welcome, I think it was included. And 99% said yes, strongly agree or agree. However, Eric Carter did research where he surveyed families who had a child with a disability. And in his research, and this just came out last spring, so it's very recent, he found that 47% of the families had left at least one church because their child was not welcome, or they were actually told, we cannot accommodate your kid. And 17% of those families left more than one church.
Mm.
So I would want senior pastors to know that this really is, it's a problem. It's a problem.
And that awareness is so important because they think, well, we're generally nice people, so we make people feel welcome and included, right? But this awareness of like, actually, no, that's not what's happening in a lot of churches. And like I asked, a lot of times the parents and families are quietly leaving. They're not
Right.
calling up their senior pastor to say, hey, we're leaving because your children's worker said that our child isn't welcome or they can't accommodate our child's needs. And so we need to find something else, right?
Right. Well, because for a lot of these families, they're advocating everywhere,
It's
at
exhausting.
school, on the sports teams. And at a certain point, they just get exhausted and say, I can't do it anymore. I was talking to a mom whose child has Down syndrome, and she said, I shouldn't have to work so hard to get my kid to be able to attend church. And that should break our hearts. So I would want senior leaders to know that. And also, um, research by Andrew Whitehead showed that the kids who are most likely to, not be welcome to church are the kids with invisible disabilities.
Yeah.
It's the kids with ADHD, autism, oppositional defiance disorder, because, I mean, Josh, obviously, what happens is you talked about assumptions. People have an assumption that a kid should behave in a certain way. And when they don't, even when they can't, then they're often going to be harsher and put this requirement on them that they simply can't do. So, what I want senior leaders to know, I think part of the issue I have found, churches that do really well with, especially kids who are neurodivergent or have big behaviors. That encompasses kids from trauma. And the churches that do really well, the senior leadership is all on board.
Mm.
And often when I dig deeper, the senior leadership has somebody in their family with a disability, with a hard background.
Yep.
And so, what I would want is for senior pastors to intentionally get in proximity with families who are living with disability. Because I think when they do that, well, for one, their heart should break for them. Again, not in a pity kind of way, but oh, I had no idea. It is a lot harder. You have so many more therapies. Your homework isn't a 30-minute thing at the end of the day. It's a 2-hour thing at the end of the day. Your time, and then the worries you have, for kids who aren't going to be able to live independently. Well, even when they're 5, the parents are worried about what's going to happen
Yeah.
when I'm not here, or what's going to happen when they're not in school anymore. Where are they going to go? Where are they going to, what's going to be a social outlet for them? So I would say find families in your community and go have lunch with them, meet them for coffee. Just ask them, how could the church better support you? What is the church doing well? What is the church not doing well? And I was meeting with a senior leader at a large church that kept talking about, yeah, they need the church. They need the church. And well, yeah, like we all need the church. And also we need them because the body of Christ is not complete if there are certain people that can't be included in it. It's a win for everybody when people of all kinds of different abilities and backgrounds and behaviors can come together within a church community.
You're preaching now. I love it. I was thinking, yeah, as a leader myself, as a pastor myself, how can I expect to have any ability to lead someone if I don't know what their reality is? If I
Right.
am out to dinner with them or go over to their house to help with homework after school or meet them at their child's sports game or performance from school or something, like if I don't actually see what their reality is like, how could I possibly know? Even what to preach to them on a Sunday,
Right.
you know?
Right. I mean, they're your sheep. You need to get close to them to find out if they got fleas or a leg that is hurting. You're not
Right,
going to be able to tell that looking at the stand at the top of the mountain, looking down into the field. You got to get close.
right. And Jesus says, my sheep know my voice, but then it's
That's
also
right.
really clear that Jesus takes, as our good shepherd, takes such care and attunes to
Yep.
each one of us at such a deep level,
Yep.
knows us so well. And obviously, we're humans, and so no pastor can live up to that fully, but that's what I would encourage pastors and ministry leaders to aspire to and to grow towards is getting to
Hmm.
know the people in your ministry and growing compassion for them.
Yeah, and it can feel overwhelming, but also to know that we can spread the joy by inviting other people to come in. And maybe we're not the primary contact with that family,
Mhm.
but somebody else is. I think often it feels overwhelming because we're not delegating and we're
Right.
not inviting other people in. I think some of the reason we're not inviting other people in is we feel kind of scared and uncomfortable. And if we feel scared and uncomfortable, like well, we don't want to invite somebody else to come into that space. And people are missing out.
I love on your website, it says that you feel like church should be a place for every child to belong. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you think belonging actually looks like, not just inclusion or not just being tolerated, but what does belonging look like?
I mean, belonging looks like when the kid comes, people are genuinely excited to see that kid. It's like, yes, Josh is here today. And then when Josh comes in, Josh can be fully himself. He does not need to mask. He does not need to hold on to the bottom of his chair to try to keep himself from jumping up. Um, it also means that we're going to disciple Josh.
Mhm.
So there may be things that um, he needs to be coached in. You know, Josh, maybe you say things kind of harshly to your friends, and so we coach you on that. It's
Mhm.
and that child isn't seen, as I said before, not seen as a project, but as a peer. And I was talking to a mom the other day because I asked her, I said, what's the difference between somebody being kind to your kid and being a friend? And she got emotional. And she said, oh, that's what we're experiencing. People are kind to my child, but my child doesn't have any friends. So that means when they come in, regardless of who they are. I mean, they got people that are inviting them to play Uno or people that know, even though you're in middle school and maybe Uno is not necessarily a middle school game, but people know I love Josh and I want to do stuff with Josh and I'm going to put away my preferences and I'm going to do what Josh loves to do. And then, Josh, you might not love to play air hockey, but that your friend loves to play air hockey. So you go and you cheer him on and
Right.
you're standing there and you're high fiving them. And it's so good for the kids too to be around people who are different. I mean, it's good for us, but belonging, it's you feel like you're home. I mean, you're with your people and you're getting the opportunity to use your gifts.
Mhm.
It's not just people serving you. But I have a friend who has a son who is profoundly disabled and communicates mainly with just some different vocal, not words, but he sits in meetings and he can communicate. Bad. Everybody knows. Oh, he thinks that's a bad idea. Well, let's talk more. He's contributing. They
Yeah.
need everybody needs to have a place where they can contribute.
I love how you started that whole thing on belonging with somebody who's delighted to see you. And I was talking just a few nights ago, actually, with some neurodivergent adults. And we were walking through Psalm 18 together. And there's this verse that talks about how the Lord rescued me because he delighted in me. And we were
Hmm.
reflecting on this, and a lot of people in general, but a lot of neurodivergent people have this idea that God just kind of tolerates them. But we see in numerous places in Scripture, Zephaniah 3 comes to my mind, where it says, the Lord your God is with you. He is mighty to save. He is delighted. He takes great delight in you, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and I think that's so important for each person, no matter their ability, no matter their brain wiring, for each person to experience somebody who is delighted to be with them as they are. And then
Yeah.
the coaching, the correction, it's coming from this place of delight. It's not saying you got to earn my delight by changing this behavior. It's saying, I'm delighted to be with you. And you know what would make your life better? I want to help you. Uh,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Well, and for those who say this kid needs to be disciplined, okay, great. And discipline happens best in the context of relationship. And people do not want to have a relationship with somebody who they don't think likes them. I mean, I talk to teachers all the time and I'm going, do you even like this kid? Because I'm not sure if you do, and I don't think they know that you do.
Mm.
And so, I mean, when it comes to that point, then we need to take time just to repair the relationship and make sure that person does know. And you were talking about, I love that scripture in Psalm about where he rescues me, takes me to a spacious place because he delights in me. But another one in Psalm, I'm fearfully, wonderfully made.
Mhm.
But then the end of it is, and my soul knows it very well.
Yes.
And for a lot of people who are neurodivergent, their soul does not know that they are fearfully and wonderfully made. I think a lot of the reason their soul doesn't know that is because the world has told them there's something wrong with them because they are not like everybody else. So I want the church to be the place that when they come in, like they know it, not just in their brain, but in their soul. They know I am a fearfully and wonderfully made creation of my creator.
Yeah, that Psalm 139 is so important for me. And to be really honest, yeah, and it feels kind of vulnerable to say, but very true, that I've had to come to that full well knowing
Yeah.
despite the way that I've been treated in
Mm,
Christian spaces and even by people
mm,
close to me who say they love me. I've had to like resist that in order to understand and to embrace and really understand and feel the fearfully, wonderfully made, that that's what God says about me. And I
yeah.
like we should be partnering with God in delivering that message to the people
Yeah,
around.
we should. Yeah, we should. Well, and Reach Hurting Kids Institute did some research that showed that for children, whatever they think the church believes about them, the church then is acting as a proxy, and
Yep.
that's they believe that is what God thinks about them. So if sweet little Josh comes in and believes that the church thinks that he's too much and that he doesn't belong, then Josh is going to believe that's what God thinks about him. And you talk about what are you going to say to senior pastors? I think that is important because I mean, I know young adults who still have difficulty accepting that God loves them, that God created them intentionally. And as we talk more, it goes back to, well, when they were 4, the church said, you can't come anymore because you get kind of wild during transitions and it disrupts everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much there. I really appreciate your awareness and your bringing some of these things to light, not just for yourself, but for the ministry leaders you work with. You've trained thousands of ministry leaders and volunteers. What kinds of transformation have you seen happen when people start to approach kids with curiosity instead of control? Are there any stories that come to mind or
Early on, gosh, a long time ago, it was one of the first conferences I spoke at. So I'm speaking to people I don't know. And there was a man in the audience that I could tell, he's got his arms crossed, and he came up afterwards and he told me, "You're just being too easy. And how are they ever gonna, know what's right and wrong?" And about a year after that conference, he sent me an email, and he started thinking about, what if some of the stuff I said was true?
Mm.
And he started trying to build relations, because one of the things I challenge them with is identify the kid that frustrates you most and try to build a relationship with that kid, find out what they're interested in. And he did. And he would ask the kid questions, and he said the kid's behavior changed.
Mm.
And he said it was all about the way I was interacting with the kid. So that was like, oh my gosh, when he sent me that, and he apologized, because this dude was not buying what I was selling. Like, he was, how you can look at an audience, you go, this he is not tracking with me. I had another situation where a woman came up to me and talked about a girl who was disruptive during worship. And this was a child who was nonverbal. Oh, no, she didn't say during worship, disruptive. And I said, well, tell me more. Because, one thing I found, a lot of times when leaders say the kid is being disruptive, and I go and look, guess who the only person that's bothered is? It's the leader. The kids are all fine. So anyway, being disruptive. So I think one of the things you got to nail down, like, is there a particular time? And she said pretty much all the time. She just screams all the time and flailing her arms. And well, as we continued to talk, it wasn't all the time. It was when the music was going. So I'm actually thinking, like, is it a sensory thing? I don't know. And so I'm like, tell me what she's doing. And she's like, her arms, she's moving her arms all over, and she's yelling out, not words, but just yelling out. And as she's telling me, and so I'm imagining what this kid looks like, I'm thinking in my head, like, it kind of sounds like worship, and so we talked about it, and she just started crying. And she said, oh my gosh, I've been trying to get her to stop, but really she can be a model to other kids of different ways to worship and uninhibited worship. And I'm like, yeah, you go, girl. So she went back and was going to communicate to her team that this was not a disruption. And so instead, this kid is not a disruption. This kid is a model of uninhibited worship.
Mm.
So those are just a couple stories. But I think especially when they kind of hear this, when they hear the science behind neurodiversity, how the brains really are wired differently. So you're experiencing the world differently. It changes the way they look at a kid behaving in a way that they don't think is acceptable. And what is acceptable anyway?
Right. And so many times, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but so many times what we're labeling as acceptable, and then we equate it with biblical, but good luck finding chapter and verse. It's actually scriptural. It's been passed down, and it needs a second look. And we need to stop just assuming that there's a one-size-fits-all way to worship God, for example, or a one-size-fits-all way to connect with God in a one-on-one time. I won't even say a quiet time, because it might not be quiet.
Right.
So,
right.
As we close today, I would love to give you a chance to speak to both parents that might be listening, and then also church leaders. But first, to parents. If there's a parent out there who's listening, who's exhausted, feels unseen, maybe isolated because church hasn't been a friendly place, maybe even a painful place for their family, what would you want them to hear today?
First, I want them to know that there is a place within the community of believers. There is a place. And I'm sorry that it's been painful as you've searched for that place. And we also need to be careful. The church is not rejecting you. There is a group of people, or maybe a leader or two at a church, that is. So please don't give up on the Big C church because a couple of people treated you in a way that they shouldn't have. And I know, probably thinking, oh, easy for you to say. And right, I know it's hard. I know it's painful, but I would just encourage you to continue to try, because we need to be in community. And I know when we're raising kids who have differences, it can feel very isolating. Everybody else thinks Fourth of July is awesome, and we're hiding in our basement under covers because our child simply, like, literally can't handle all the noise
Right.
and the bright lights. So that would be my encouragement. And to find, there are places online. Your first step in community, maybe it's an online group where then you can go, oh, I'm not alone. I know when we adopted our two kids, I went through a period where I'm like, I'm a terrible mother. I'm not even sure I'm a stable person.
Mhm.
And then when I got together with other adoptive parents, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with my daughters. It's just really hard. This is just a hard journey.
Yeah.
So continue. That's what I would say to parents. Continue to work to get in community. And maybe your first step is to find a place online.
Yeah. And believing, I love what you said, believing that there is a place for you in the body of Christ.
Yeah, there is. We need you.
Yeah.
We need you.
What would you say to a church leader who's listening, who, if you could ask them to remember just one thing about neurodivergent children and their families, what would you say, or what would you want them to hear?
When Jesus gave us the Great Commission, it applies to the autistic kid across the street and the kid with, big behaviors. And it's not just a responsibility, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to welcome people of all types into our church community. And I have learned and grown so much by being in close proximity to people who are different. So I would say, and if you have a family that maybe has, as you said, quietly slipped away, like send them a Starbucks gift card and ask if you can do a phone call or come and sit on their front porch with them and just ask them, how can we as a church better support you? We miss you. We miss you. How can we make it easier for you to come back? And know that, especially for parents raising kids, with disabilities or neurodivergent, we need to figure out what's the best place for them to meet. Because Starbucks might not be the best place. They might not be able to get childcare. Taking a kid, some kids into Starbucks, that ain't no fun, Josh. Like, you don't want to do that. But maybe if we just, take them some Diet Cokes and Doritos and sit on their back porch with them and get to know them while their kid is playing in a familiar setting. I mean, that's the first step in putting away I'm going to go back. You said assumptions, going back to our assumptions of what a meeting should look like.
Mm-hmm.
And instead go, what's my priority? My goal is I want to spend time with this family. So let's find out the best way for them to do it, not the way I'm most comfortable in
I
doing
love
it.
that so much. And pastors, if you want bonus points, you could even ask them, what are some safe foods that I could bring to you? Or what are your favorite,
Oh, it's
right?
good.
If me as an autistic kid sees you as a pastor walk through the door with my safe food, wow, that already communicates
Right.
much love and care. And I am already more open just by that,
That's right. That's right. And can I say something about safe foods? Because I will have people say, but they need vegetables or they need this or they need that. Believe the parents. If the parents say that the kid only eats beige food, the goal is not for you to introduce green vegetables in their diet. Give them mashed potatoes, banana pudding, and chicken nuggets. Believe them.
Yeah. And also, like, one green vegetable once a week at church is not
That's
that's
right. That's not changing anything.
but it will make the experience at church more miserable for the child. So,
Yeah, well, yeah, well.
well, Kim, this has been delightful. Thank you so much. I feel the hope as you speak. I feel your love for people as you speak. I'm just really grateful that you're in this space and that God is giving you opportunities to encourage and challenge ministry leaders and pastors all over the country. That makes me really happy. How can people find you if they'd like to connect with you and your ministry?
I mean, the best place is I'm active on Instagram at Kim Botto, KIMBOTTO. Also, my website, kimbotto.com. And if you're a ministry leader, in my kind of retired life, I am doing all kinds of things where opportunities for ministry leaders to come together to learn and grow. And if you go to the website, you'll find out about that. And that has been a super cool thing. That started, a year and a half ago. I was in a children's ministry website where people were going, I'm just going to quit. I'm so exhausted. I feel so alone. And so I just said, well, anybody want to have like a virtual coffee date? And the Kid Men Hangout was born from that. And we had people from literally every state. I think we're up to like 25 countries people participated. So it's all free. And connect with me on Instagram or on our website. And I would love to help you get in a community. Because just like we want families of neurodivergent kids to be in community with others, we want kids ministry leaders to be in community with others, because we can learn and grow hearing what other people are doing.
That's beautiful. Thanks so much, Kim. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Neurodivergent Faith. If you like what you heard, consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing this with someone who might need to hear it too. And as you continue to wrestle with faith and identity, remember, your unique brain is a part of God's creative genius. Whether it's the way you process scripture, engage with prayer, or connect with others, you are a reflection of the vast creativity of our Creator. May you trust that God knows you, delights in you, and is working in you exactly as you are. And may you know that you are not walking this journey alone. See you next time.